Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Akabane101 and welcome to my Warhammer End Times Vermintide First Impressions video. This is where you're going to get all my thoughts currently right now on the beta of the game. After the first phase of the beta is over, I've put about 21 hours into the game so far, and I'm very excited to give you some of the information I have found while playing the game. I've very much enjoyed my time with it so far. And of course, I'll point out any of the negatives I may have come across. In fact, just going to point out, once again, this is a beta game right now. It does not release until October 23rd. There are a lot of issues currently being worked on by the developers. In particular, the frame rate. The frame rate, unfortunately, right now is not perfect, so a lot of the footage you're going to be seeing today is going to be running between either the high setting or the extreme setting, possibly even some footage on the lowest setting. So, you may notice some differences in the graphical fidelity as you see here, as well as the frame rate will not be a perfectly buttery smooth 60 FPS because I just simply don't have, multiple NVIDIA Titans to brute force the game at 60 FPS. In fact, Total Biscuit was playing the game not too long ago, and even he got some performance issues with his dual GPU Titans, which is kind of insane. So just keep that in mind. They're working very hard to improve the frame rate, and I'll let you know in the future. I may even add an annotation to this video. No promises, of course, but I may do an update video maybe instead of that, and let you know how the performance has improved in the future when the October 23rd release comes out. Alright, so Warhammer Vermintide, it is a Left 4 Dead style game, and it controls beautifully, I think. It's a lot of fun fighting the enemies Skaven in the Warhammer fantasy setting. This is, of course, the End Times setting, if you hadn't already caught that with the title itself. So basically the end phase of what Warhammer Fantasy, leads up to. And if you don't know what Warhammer Fantasy is, it's a Games Workshop title, tabletop, really. And it came out way before even Warhammer 40,000 was a thing. This is basically the game that spawned Warhammer 40,000 later on. And there's even another title coming out called Total War Warhammer, which is pretty crazy. It's very rare to see a lot of games that are taking place in the Warhammer fantasy universe, and it's pretty cool to see that Fat Shark is deciding to take it upon themselves to make something like this, because I think they have something here, because it's a lot of fun. I can't stop thinking about the game. Every time I think about it, I'm just like, man, I really want to get the next piece of loot, and it's a lot of fun just playing the game. Anyway, before we really get into the heroes that you'll be playing as and the enemies you'll be looking at, the items, the loot, all that stuff, I'm just going to cover the options settings pretty quickly here. So there is an FOV slider, a field of view slider. It goes from 50 FOV all the way up to 120. So all you Quake players out there should have no problems whatsoever delving on into this game. There's full screen, borderless full screen, windowed mode, and multiple resolutions going above 1080p. Someone asked me if you can play this game with two monitors attached to each other. I don't know if you can do that, but I'm sure you can. Don't take my word for it, though. But there's multiple resolutions, so maybe you'll get lucky. Also, there's plenty of options in the game you can tweak. Anisotropic filtering, SSAO, anti-aliasing, texture quality, character quality. Don't think you can change the view distance. You can change various lighting settings, all that type of stuff. Most of the options go from very low settings to extreme. So if you're interested in playing this game at the highest settings, you can go ahead and do that. It does look very beautiful at that. You can turn off the depth of field, and you can turn off the motion blur for people that do not like seeing that stuff with their games as well. So there you have that. So that's options pretty much out of the way. Oh yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that there is also audio sliders, so you can turn off the background music and you can turn off the sound effects. However, I do have one bugbear. You cannot turn off the voices specifically. It would be nice, for me anyway, to just turn off the character voices, considering a lot of the time I like to do commentary over a game, and if the characters start talking, it kind of interrupts what I'm trying to say, so it can be a little bit distracting. So, personally, I would like to have it so I can just turn off the character voices, leave the subtitles on screen so I can read it while it's going along, while I'm commentating and stuff. And that would be very cool, if the developers are, of course, listening to that criticism. So, how does it play? Well, it's very simple to play. You got the left mouse button, which is your light attack, and you can hold it down for a heavy attack. Depending on what type of attack you do, you'll do various amounts of damage, and every single weapon in the game, whether it be a cutlass or twin daggers, a giant warhammer, the heavy attack will always have some sort of extra benefit to it, whether it be armor piercing or I think it's actually just armor piercing. Usually it's armor piercing or homing missiles. If you have a bow that has homing abilities, you can actually home in on some of the enemies, and other things like that. With your right mouse button, you can block and you can draw bows and arrows back, so you can fire those and aim closely. And for the mage, you can actually use fireballs with that, so more on that in a moment once we talk about the Bright Wizard. Then you also have a special button for combat. This specifically seems to only work for witch hunters, which have flintlock pistols, and while they have their cutlass drawn, they actually have a secondary gun they can fire at any time, so you can actually map that to another button and they can fire it off. There's even a dodge mechanic in the game. If you hit A, S, or D plus the space bar, you're able to do a dodge at any point, and you can dodge back, dodge left, and dodge right. You cannot dodge forward, you will just jump if you're holding the W key, but that's very useful. Another cool gameplay mechanic is the fact that you can hit T while looking at an item. Say you're looking at a potion or something and you want another player to pick it up. Unfortunately, there's no voiceover IP in the game at the moment, which would be great if they added that in with push-to-talk functionality. But right now, all we get is a chat box in the bottom left of the screen. So the best way to communicate with your players right now is to hit the T key while aiming at either a very powerful enemy, like a armored enemy or something, just a special. And you hit the T key, it'll put a blue border around the enemy, and your allies will be able to see that and react accordingly. Okay, so let's get into the heroes. The first hero I'm going to be talking about right now is actually the first hero I ever played in the game. The first time I turned on the game, this is the hero that struck my eye the most. It was called the Bright Wizard, and she uses a staff and a short sword. And of course, if you're called a wizard, then you're a goddamn wizard, and you can fire fireballs at enemies, which are very powerful AoE attacks. You can also do single-target long-range fireballs that are a bit weaker, but they can one-shot some of the smaller enemies in the game, the Skaven warriors that are just wandering around the map. But the most important thing about the Bright Wizard is the fact that you can use these giant fireballs that you can throw out at enemies and kill at least 10 to 20 at one time if you charge it up enough. In fact, charging up attacks is very important in this game because if you don't let the full animation go through for your charge attack, you may not do full damage. However, with the Bright Wizard, if you pull the fireball out just halfway and chuck it, you may be able to get some extra damage over time abilities, such as burn the enemies to death, things like that. You know, burn the rat scum, get them killed very easily with that. And especially that works very well when there's a lot of enemies surrounding you, and you really just can't pull out your sword and defend yourself with that, because wizards are not particularly that great in melee combat. They can do what they can if it's one-on-one combat, but when you're completely surrounded, a Bright Wizard really has no choice other than to pull out a fireball and attack in front of them. And a lot of people have been saying that the Bright Wizard is potentially the most powerful character in the game. I tend to disagree. I think all characters are pretty much overpowered in their own way. But the Wizard is completely nerfed by the fact that they do AoE damage in the Nightmare difficulties, or higher. In Nightmare and Cataclysm, there's AoE damage from your weapons, or from your ranged weapons, and you can do damage to your allies, so that's a huge nerf in and of itself. Also the fact that you overheat over time as you use more of your fire abilities with your staff, so you do have to end up switching to your melee weapon, which again is not nearly going to be as powerful as your magical powers with your fire attacks. So wizards do have that nerf. Of course they can nuke entire squads of enemies, but they have to watch out for that overheating. In fact, if you overheat too much, you'll just straight up explode and do damage to all targets around you. This could be extremely dangerous too in Nightmare difficulty and Cataclysm difficulty if you tend to explode around all of your allies, because you could end up killing your entire team, or at least taking like 90% of their HP away if you accidentally explode in the wrong place. However, on the flip side, you can do that same ability and explode on a giant enemy, say a rat ogre, and do massive amounts of damage to them, and it's actually pretty crazy when you do that and pull it off. But for the most part, I found Bright Wizard to be my second favorite character. My favorite character happened to be the Way Watcher, the Wood Elf Archer, which is probably my favorite. I'd have to say. Bright Wizard is cool and all. I'll put about 6 hours into that, but after I played Way Watcher for enough time, after getting some pretty cool weapons for her, I found her to be my favorite because the way that you fire bows in the game, you can draw back the bow with the right mouse button with the bow equipped, and you can do a heavy attack. And I got a weapon later on that had an armor-piercing ability. And this armor-piercing ability is great for, you know, those giant knight-like heavy warriors that you can run into in the game, and you can just shoot them anywhere and they'll take damage. Otherwise, if you don't have an armor-piercing weapon, you have to aim for their head, which can be quite difficult. But with this upgraded bow with armor-piercing, the arrows can go straight through unarmored opponents and hit the one behind them and kill them both immediately. Which means I was doing double kills left and right, and it just felt amazing as I just drew back the bow and fired it at the enemy. And the sound effects for the game are just extraordinary. The visual feedback as well feels great, depending on where you hit the Skaven warriors. Depends on how, or shows off how the Skaven can flip over. So if you shoot them in the shin or something, the force of the arrow is so strong it can send the Skaven flipping over onto his face. Or if you shoot them in the head, they'll fly backwards and fall to the ground on their back. Things like that. The animation quality, by the way, for a lot of the enemies is just out of this world. It's very nice to watch as the enemies get hit by your blades and they kind of fling over or fall over, become beheaded, and they can't, and the body's kind of like still standing as it's about to fall over. It's just a lot of fun to look at. But however, excuse me, I gush over this game. You can tell I've had a lot of fun with it because I just love talking about it already. My Way Watcher, my Wood Elf, she had twin blades, which I found to probably be the best items for me in the game, because if you do the heavy attack with them by holding down the left mouse button, she'll bring the swords around her body and then slice in a scissor motion, and you can cut off multiple heads of enemies in front of you in a large arc. And it's absolutely beautiful to watch as a perfect heavy attack goes through, and you hit like 3 enemies and 3 heads go flying, and you go, oh my god, and you set it up for another one and just keep going. You can also attack fairly quickly with twin blades if you're hitting the light attack button over and over again. That can work pretty well. And with the block mechanic, you can block up to 3 attacks, and some characters can block up to 4. And the dwarf, for instance, when he has a shield and axe, he can block up to 5 attacks at once, making him the most tanky character. In fact, one of the great things about the game is as you play around with it and play with some of your friends, you'll realize some great synergies between the characters. For example, the dwarf can pretty much synergize with any other character just by holding up his shield. And the Empire Soldier, which we'll get into as well in a moment, he can get a sword and shield and act the same as a dwarf, only he's a human. So the dwarf can, since he's so short, which is great for him because he can just stand in a corridor and hold up his shield and block 5 attacks, that allows the Way Watcher and the Bright Wizard and the other characters that have guns, like the Witch Hunter, to fire volleys at a clump of enemies and just blow them to smithereens. Which is great because you need to be able to block a lot of attacks, and if you're a character like me that likes to play the Wood Elf, you're not going to be able to block that many hits. But if you can focus on being offensive and have your allies worry about being defensive, then you can have a great satisfying gameplay strategy there, because it's just a lot of fun to take out hordes and hordes of enemies. So I found the Way Watcher to be by far my favorite. So fun to play. Absolutely loved it. Next, we have the Witch Hunter, so kind of like the polar opposite, I guess, of the Bright Wizard. Witch Hunter and Way Watcher, by the way, they don't have any sort of cooldowns. Instead, they have ammunition. So all characters except for the Bright Wizard need to pick up ammunition drops that are around the map. And you may start with, say, 70 arrows. And once you start running out of those arrows, you can need to go find these ammo spots kind of strewn around the map. Sometimes it's just 1 pack of ammo, so you can just pick that up and refill your ammo to maximum. And someone else will have to find another ammo pack to fill it up. Other times you may have a giant box of ammo and you can go grab that, and that could work as well. But anyway, back to the Witch Hunter. He is a gunman. He also uses a cutlass. You can hold down the right mouse button, the block button, while he has his guns, his dual flintlock pistols equipped, and while that's held down, he'll move a bit slower, but then he can rapid fire his guns in front of himself, and it feels amazing. He starts with 48 flintlock pistols in his pocket, so you can just stand still, hold down the block button, and just fire away, and he's just like pulling these flintlock rifles from who knows where, and just blasting Skaven to smithereens, probably being the most efficient character in the game for someone that has just 48 shots, and you can really obliterate entire packs of enemies. It's a lot of fun. The Cutlass, on the other hand, feels a lot like you're playing a dexterity character in something like Dark Souls, I found. Very, very fast attacks. He even has a heavy attack that is a stabbing motion, so one of the few characters in the game that actually have a stab attack. Most characters, when they do a heavy attack, it's most likely going to be a wide range, hit multiple enemies at once attack. But this guy is more of a skewer attack because it's a cutlass, because you have to stab forward to do the most damage with the character. But when you're just slashing left and right with your light attacks, is also very efficient. Most of the time, you'll start beheading a lot of enemies. And it seems that his starting weapon is powerful enough to behead most of the standard enemies if you get the right spot. In fact, aiming your weapons is extremely important in this game. If you're not aiming for the head, you are not going to be getting those critical hits, and you're going to be missing out on a lot of bonus damage. Especially when there's a lot of Skaven coming towards you, you're going to need to be able to kill them quickly. Again, that's why I really like the Way Watcher so much, because her twin scissor attack is so good. You can behead multiple enemies in front of you, do damage to any of the enemies behind the ones that you just beheaded, and then get ready for another attack very quickly. So, Witch Hunter, really good class. I don't think I mentioned this already, but the fact that this is kind of similar to Left 4 Dead, they also took the idea of characters like to talk to each other in game. So, for example, the Witch Hunter and the Bright Wizard, they are kind of polar opposites in a way. Even though a wizard is not technically a witch, they're kind of still mages, and witch hunters don't particularly like anyone that use magic. They don't trust them. You'll find that a lot in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, or even just the 40,000 universe. A lot of characters, I'm sorry, I bumped the mic there. A lot of characters don't really trust each other entirely. So the Witch Hunter and the Bright Wizard will have little conversations about, you know, how like, oh, you should be locked away or something like that. Or the Wizard's like, don't expect you're going to be arresting me after this, or we're not going back to the prisons after this one, Witch Hunter type stuff. And the Way Watcher and the Dwarf Ranger are basically a female Legolas and Gimli from Lord of the Rings. Like, there's no other way to put it. They talk exactly the same as those characters would. They count their kills. They make fun of each other. The Way Watcher, whenever she sees the dwarf do some sort of range attack with his crossbows, she's like, oh, we could make a ranger out of you yet, Mr. Leatherfoot, or something like that. It's a lot of fun. The dialogue, by the way, is just crisp, perfect, very well written. Nice little snippets here and there where, you know, they kind of take jabs at each other, but it's kind of lighthearted in this very dark and gritty universe. It's not like, you know, in the grim darkness of the future and the year 40,000, everyone is murdering each other and doing chaosy things. It's more like, you know, in the grim darkness of the past, everyone's still trying to get through there with a little bit of comedy here and there, and trying to have a good time. Alright, so since we're talking a little bit more about the Dwarf Ranger there, Dwarf Ranger, I've already mentioned he uses an axe and a shield. He can use just a warhammer or a two-handed axe if he so likes, depending on the loot that the player gets. But he does start out officially with a sword, or sorry, with an axe and a shield. And he also has a crossbow, which is a bit slow firing, I'd have to say. Like, it takes quite a bit of time to reload his crossbow, as it should. Logically, a crossbow takes a long time to reload, but it does take about 2 or 3 seconds longer than what it would take for an archer to draw her bow. In fact, an archer doesn't even need to draw her bow. She can just rapid fire with the left mouse button for light attacks and still get one-shot kills if she's close enough to the enemy. Anyway, the great thing about the Dwarf Ranger, though, is that he doesn't need to draw back his crossbow, so he can just fire at any point, zoomed in or not, and he'll do exactly the same damage, which means his crossbow doesn't have any sort of benefits for aiming the weapon other than a little bit of extra accuracy, and the player can see a bit farther down the line. Other than that, I really personally, I enjoy the dwarf. I didn't find him to be my favorite character, of course. I found the elf to be way better, but I love having someone on my team be the dwarf because he works so well with people like the elf who are much taller. I believe the elf is actually the tallest in the whole group of, whole roster of heroes, and you're able to do a lot of extra damage there. Last but not least is the Empire Soldier. Unfortunately, his dialogue, the Empire Soldier, the human of the group, he doesn't really have as much to say as everyone else. I feel like he wasn't as inspired as the other characters. Maybe that's just me, but from what I've noticed, he doesn't seem to have that kind of witty comebacks or insults or whatever. He doesn't really hate anyone. He doesn't love anyone. He's kind of there. Sometimes a dwarf will say something like, "Oh, I'm hungry," and the Empire Soldier's like, "No, you're not." But then the Empire Soldier will never elaborate on that. In fact, the Bright Wizard ends up elaborating instead, which is kind of odd to me. So, dialogue-wise, I wish the Empire Soldier just had something more to say. But how does he play, which is probably what you're asking, and that is, he plays excellently. His Warhammer that he starts with is absolutely badass. He's the only character to start with a weapon that, just on a light attack alone, is armor-piercing. So the Warhammer will pierce through any sort of armor, which, historically, I think that's correct anyway. I mean, just hitting someone with a Warhammer, I'm pretty sure you're going to dent their armor and break something inside. So that's what Warhammers are designed for. They're designed to break through armor. So any enemies, like the Skaven Heavy Warriors, which I think are currently the only characters in the game, or enemies in the game to have heavy armor, you can just use the Warhammer against those, and even just doing light attacks, you'll do heavy damage. Not to mention, the Warhammer has a heavy attack, which is like a wide arc swing, not unlike the Waywatcher attack, except for he just swings it like a baseball bat very hard, and you can hit maybe up to 6 Skaven at once, and just scoop them aside, because it's so heavy of an attack, and you feel the weight of the impact as it just slams into the faces and skulls of these Skaven rats as they just fly across the map. It's absolutely wonderful to see someone play the Empire Soldier well. I was playing with Ezekiel III the other day, and he got the Empire Soldier, and he just blew his mind. He was like, "This is amazing!" He just couldn't contain his excitement for the game as he just went ahead and started beating the shit out of some poor Skaven. I feel so bad for those Skaven, man. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. As for a ranged weapon for the Empire Soldier, he gets, well, I unlocked 2 different weapons. I unlocked the blunderbuss, which is actually the starting item in the game. It's a blunderbuss. It's the shotgun that looks like a cannon, and it has a huge wide arc, really great for dealing with hordes that are surrounding you. If you do a heavy attack and you get hit while you're trying to charge your heavy attack, you'll actually get stunned and you won't be able to do that attack. You have to restart it. So the blunderbuss is great for switching over to and just firing on a massive squad of Skaven that are charging you. It gives you a moment to kind of open up and do some of your heavier attacks. Moving on to the enemies of the game now. So now you've learned about all of the hero units. Now it's time to learn about each of the monsters you will be fighting inside the game. So there is only one race that will be at release. The developer said if they wanted to do another race, they will make another game that focuses on another race. So sorry to those orc lovers out there or anyone else that is interested in other horde-like enemies. The Skaven will be the only ones we play against in the game. But please understand that the Skaven are actually very cool, and they're much more intelligent than zombies in Left 4 Dead. In fact, let me just talk a little bit about the AI before we go into some of the detail here about each individual warrior. The Skaven are more intelligent. These are monsters that used to be human. They were converted by some sort of chaos-like thing, and they have begun to form clans. And I believe there's 4 clans total in Warhammer Fantasy of Skaven that are well known. These are clans that have stuck around for a very, very long time. Usually smaller clans that work together break up very quickly. If you've ever looked at orc lore in the Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer 40,000 universe, you know that orcs, they like to only follow the biggest and toughest orc, and Skaven are no different. They act exactly the same. The bigger the Skaven, the better chance that Skaven's going to be the leader of the group because he's going to be the strongest, and the others will follow out of fear, which is absolutely cool. And by the way, I did read up on this stuff. I'm not actually reading this from a wiki, even though I did read a wiki a while ago. Because I wanted to learn about the Skaven, and they seem very interesting. They're cunning, they're intelligent, they think about betrayal a lot, although they don't commit to betrayal that much either. But the fact that they are intelligent enough to think that way, to think about betraying someone, to think about sneaking up on someone, you can see it in some of their movements. Sometimes they'll get like a random horde that kind of just charges you, but every now and again you'll notice that the Skavens start to kind of surround you and stand by, as some will attack you as they go forward, or you will charge them, and they'll kind of step back a little bit and kind of reassess the situation before getting a strong hit on you. And it's just very wonderful to see. But these Skaven are not like the zombies of Left 4 Dead, where they'll just rush you once they see you. These ones will stand back, they'll assess the situation like I said, and then they'll go ahead and attack you, which I find to be very cool. It's that subtle hint that the AI is trying to show that, okay, I'm more intelligent than an enemy that's just going to rush you purely and not actually care about my life. But, that being said, there is lore, as Skaven are well known to just slaughter themselves to get to you, really. There's an idea that you are a fighter, right? You're just a human soldier. You are probably better than 2 Skaven. However, you're not better than 3 Skaven. So the first Skaven comes up, you cleanly slice him, but now your sword is bloody. The second Skaven comes up, you go and hit that Skaven, your sword gets stuck inside of him, but you do kill him. The third Skaven comes up and cuts your head off, because your sword got stuck. And therefore, that third Skaven believes that those other 2 Skaven deserve to die, and it had to be that way. And so that Skaven believes in himself just a bit longer until he becomes one of those 2 Skaven later on. And that's basically how the Skaven work in the game. They kind of just charge you and go ahead and die until the third one gets the kill. Stuff like that. Although you'll be killing many and many, many, many Skaven warriors as time goes on. Anyway, that was a huge tangent. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Now let's go into the enemies, because that's what we're doing. So the standard Skaven you'll be running into as you battle along the vast landscapes in Warhammer End Times Vermintide are the Skaven warriors. These are just standard warriors. They don't carry shields, they don't carry anything defensive. They simply carry small daggers, they have spears, they have swords, they have not really much. They have their own claws on their body, they can bite you. That's pretty much it, and they'll charge you and try and kill you viciously. These probably are the stupidest monsters in the game, but they at least try. They try real hard. Next, you have your much smarter and braver and crazier Skaven, which I like to call these Skaven Heavy Warriors. These are considered special units, almost, where they're your basic Skaven warrior, but they're wearing heavy armor, and their only weak point seems to be their face. So if you don't have a armor-piercing weapon, you're going to need to be able to find a way to hit that guy in the face, or else you are screwed. You can aim for the face with your melee weapons, and you can hit for the face with your ranged weapons as well. So you should have no problems doing so. Just play it very smart, because they will kick your ass. They usually come in packs of 6 or so. So if you don't have any sort of explosive weapons with you, you may die horribly, and it'll be terrible for everyone, because they do not hold back. They will do absurd amounts of damage. They will cluster around you, surround you, and kill you as fast as humanly possible. And I really like the Heavy Warriors. Probably my favorite enemy, to be honest, in the game. Next, we have the Skaven Assassin, very similar to the Assassin-type characters in Left 4 Dead. They pounce you, they stab you until you die, and that's that. And speaking of dying, by the way, there is 3 downs in the game, so if you go down 3 times, on the 4th time you go down, you die for good, and then you'll spawn later on in the map. So if you die for good, you'll just spawn later on. And someone else can go pick you up, and you'll get all your downs back and all that. And I'll explain how you can heal those downs later, before you actually go down forever. Next is the Skaven Poison Bomber, pretty much the Smoker from Left 4 Dead. He throws giant vials of poison at you, and it makes a giant puff bomb of green poison smoke. And if you do enough damage to the character, he'll actually trigger an explosive on his back. I think what he does is he overdrives his poison smoke bomb machine on his back, and then he'll run towards you and try and explode and kill you that way, which can be pretty effective. So very dangerous to fight this one in melee combat, unless you have more than one person fighting it, then you should be okay. Next is the Skaven Kidnapper, which is almost the most hilarious enemy I've encountered here. Only because I saw Ezekiel in my party get pulled away by a Skaven so far that we had only one choice, and I had to throw a bomb through a tunnel just to save his ass. And I actually did it, and it was a lot of fun. But he was just terrified. He's freaking out as he's being pulled away. And the Skaven Kidnappers, what they do, they're basically like dog snatchers. And they'll have this long stick where they wrap it around your neck and just pull you away from the party as far away as possible as they can. And once they feel like they've gotten to a safe location or they've gone a certain distance, they'll stick the pole in the ground and he'll hang you to death. And your friends have to come along and try and get you down. Now, if they do start to hang you, the kidnapper will just grab another pole and try and grab someone else and even use you as bait, which is absurd and evil. And I can't believe whoever programmed that character to be so evil, but they are. And you will have to send someone or more than one person back to the guy that's hanging to kill the kidnapper before you actually save the guy, or else the person going to save the dude hanging is going to get kidnapped as well, and then it's just an endless vicious cycle of death and horrible things happening to everyone. Next, we got the Rat Ogre, which is the exact same as the tank from Left 4 Dead, only it's a giant rat, and unfortunately there's not too many special abilities. He just kind of charges you, he punches you, doesn't really do anything too interesting. You can't grapple him. I kind of wish that you could grapple this enemy because he's so massive. I mean, it would be so cool if they took some liberties with the story, like if they took the dwarf and let the elf chuck the dwarf onto the ogre and have the dwarf do damage on the back of the ogre. I think that would be cool. Something like that. I don't know. I would think something fun like that would be awesome. One thing that the Rat Ogre can't do, but the tank can, is the tank in Left 4 Dead can throw rocks where the ogre cannot, but the ogre seems to be much faster and more agile, and moves up on you very quickly. In fact, this one will punch you off of ledges a lot easier than you'll find the tank that can do that. So Rat Ogre, very dangerous, will end runs for sure. It's ended a lot of my runs, even on normal difficulty. In fact, the difficulty in the game, let's get into that since we're done with the enemies now. This game is really difficult. Let me just explain this to you. Easy mode will wipe you if you have no idea what you're doing, and normal mode will just wipe the floor with you if you are not paying attention for even a few seconds, because once you delve into the game, you realize that this is very different, a very different ball game AI-wise than Left 4 Dead. Again, like I said, going back to the way that the Skaven control themselves, they are a lot more intelligent. They will try and swarm you, they will move together, they will not go one-on-one with you, they will try and find others and team up. Or they'll blow their horn and have many come in and try and kill you. And that's just normal difficulty. On hard difficulty and nightmare difficulty, they don't get more health. They get the same amount of health as they would on easy mode. However, they will do a lot more damage and they'll act even smarter and try and get you from behind. And on nightmare difficulty, when you have friendly fire enabled, it is just insanity. Honestly, I never beat one mission on nightmare difficulty because it's that hard. Even with a full group of people, me, Loco2525, Satellitzer Games, and another guy called Grockies, we attempted Nightmare on one of the easiest maps. I believe it was called Man the Ramparts, and I'll get into the maps in a moment. But, oh my god, it is way different than any of the other difficulties. Nightmare difficulty alone, insanity, and Cataclysm is one harder than that. I have no idea how I'm going to be able to beat that without putting at least 50 hours into this game and getting some of the best loot, or just understanding the maps as best as possible, because even on normal difficulty, we die. And that's how difficult this game is. So, it may be because we're bad. We could just be bad at the game. That's true. But I think it's just, we need to understand the maps more, and learning the maps is extremely important, and knowing where items are, knowing where bonuses are for extra loot and dice, super important when it comes to this game. Player knowledge is by far an essential thing to have in this game, or else you are just going to be screwed through and through. Alright, so there's 3 different maps in the game. There is the Horn of Magnus, which is the first one. This is when your characters leave the inn for the first time. In fact, the panning shot as you enter the level is of all your characters leaving the inn. And you have to go ring the Horn of Magnus, which is this giant horn on top of a tower. And getting there, you have to go through various tasks. For example, one of them is there's a gate that's locked, so there's a bunch of gunpowder barrels that you can take from the city guard. You grab these barrels, carry them along a short distance, and then you can chuck them out the door, and once you have 3, they'll explode, and you'll be able to progress through the next area. Each of these areas, of course, where you have some sort of area of contesting, I think the phrase is, that's where you get lots of hordes of enemies trying to kill you. But along the way to get to the final area, you're going to be finding various items. So to heal your wounds, you need medical bandages. So if you go down once or twice, or even the 3rd time, you're going to need medical bandages to cure those wounds, because you only get 3 wounds, and then you're out, and then you get teleported to the further reaches of the map, tied up, and then allies are going to have to go and save you. Now, if you don't need to heal a wound, you can grab a healing draft, and this is just a little potion that you can chug. It's a bit faster to use than the medical bandages, and I find it to be fairly nice to have. You get, I think, 10 bars of health in the game, and a healing draft heals 4 bars of health, where a medical bandage heals, I think, 8. I'm hoping I'm getting that right. Other items you'll find, there's speed potions and damage potions. These take up a different slot. So when I say slots, you have your melee weapon slot, which is always the same. You can't loot new items in the game. You only have your melee weapon and your ranged weapon throughout the entire fight, and then you get loot at the end with a dice roll. More about that later. So you got your melee weapon, your ranged weapon, your medical weapon, which would be the healing bandages or the healing draft. Then you have your support item, which is the speed potion or damage potion. These will boost speed or damage. And then lastly, you have your bomb, your throwable weapon items, which are fire bombs and regular bombs. And those last 3 that I mentioned, the medical stuff, the speed stuff, and the fire bombs, whatever, those are things you find throughout the map. So you find those, you can use those at any time. But there's a twist. If you want to get the best loot in the game, there's a dice mechanic at the end of each level. So at the end of each level, you get 6 dice, and each of these dice have markings on the sides, and you want to get those markings to come up. So the best way to do that is to get items such as tomes and grimoires and extra dice you find throughout the map. These tomes will have extra markings on the dice at the end, and they'll replace some of the shittier dice that you can get at the end of each mission. So for example, a tome will take up your healing item slot, and you can put down the tome to heal yourself up, but you're going to want to take that tome with you, because you're going to run into situations where you cannot go back. You cannot reverse your progression. You can only go forward. So you're going to have to be playing a lot safer with having a tome in your inventory. The grimoires are even worse. You have to deal with it, removing 20% HP from all characters on the map. So you and your 3 allies have 20% reduced HP, and to throw in a bonus there, these grimoires, which are books of chaos, these, if you try and remove them from your inventory, they disappear forever. So you have to go and redo the whole mission again if you want to get these grimoires back. However, on the plus side, the grimoire is a 6-marking, 6-sided dice, so it's a guaranteed dice roll. You'll always get this dice roll. And you're probably wondering, what are these dice rolls for? Why do I want these markings? Well, at the end of every mission, there is 7 different markings on the right side of the screen. So these will have various different items on them, ranging from, rolling a 0 to rolling a 6. So there's 7 different potential items that you can get. The items that I've seen rarity-wise is white for common, green for uncommon, and blue for rare. That's what I've personally seen. I'm assuming there's probably other rarities out there, maybe on Nightmare difficulty you get a chance for an orange item or a purple item or whatever else there is out there, but from what I personally have seen in the game, since I have not beaten Nightmare mode just yet, those seem to be the rarities so far. And in fact, if you keep getting a lot of the crappier items, like say you get a bunch of white items and you just don't need these ones because some of them are a bit samey, or you just literally get the exact same item over and over again, you can take, say, 5 white items, 5 common items, and put them together and fuse them into a better, more rare item. So you can turn 5 commons into 1 uncommon, or 5 uncommon into 1 rare, or 5 rare into 1 super duper rare, Super Saiyan type, I don't know, thing. I don't even know anymore, but yeah, that's what that is. And then, once you get yourself some rare items, you can upgrade those even further with some dust. So the game takes a little bit from Diablo 3, where you can take an item, say, you can take a common item, which is white, and you can salvage it and turn it into white dust. You can take this little bit of white dust and shove it into your green uncommon item, and that item will then unlock a new trait that may be on it that was currently locked. For example, you can get bonuses to speed, so you get, like, say, a 10% chance to increase your speed by 25% chance every time you hit a enemy, period. And that could be extremely useful because attack speed is a huge factor in the game. In fact, speed potions will increase not only your movement speed, but your attack speed as well, which can make the difference in some combat situations for sure. So hopefully that explains the forge and some of the items you'll be running into. Oh, and I forgot to mention that there is also just random dice lying around the map. There's 4 different types of dice here. I think I wrote them down. The standard dice have 2 markings on them, and then there's cursed dice, which I didn't mention, but the cursed dice are just random dice that are kind of strewn around the map, and sometimes there's a loot goblin, and if you kill him before he gets away, he'll drop a dice, and you can actually grab that, and that's a cursed dice that has 3 markings on a 6-sided die, which can be extremely useful. So there's standard dice for 2 markings, cursed dice for 3 markings, tomes, which are mechanical-looking dice, for 4 markings, and a grimoire dice, which is green, for 6 of 6 markings, which is by far the best one, but the most difficult one to hold on to. So I think that covers that so far for the items. There's 2 other maps that I haven't mentioned yet. There's Man the Ramparts, which is one where you're on the outskirts of the city. Or sorry, you're on not the outskirts, but you're on the wall of the city. Kind of think of Attack on Titan when they're defending the wall at one point and they're standing on the side there. Basically the same thing, except for there's not Titans, I guess. And you're defending that wall. You have to go up and destroy a Skaven bell. And what this bell is, basically, is if it rings, it'll turn humans around the area into Skaven and, you know, reinforce the Skaven army. So you don't want that to happen, obviously, or else you'll all be swarmed by even more Skaven. In fact, a lot of people have mentioned that it's kind of crazy that only one clan of Skaven has been able to muster up enough forces to do such a huge onslaught on such a massive city, really. The scale of the city is absolutely absurd, so it's crazy to a lot of people to see so many rats in just one area. But maybe it'll be explained in the game, maybe it won't. Again, the story is only really explained through character dialogue and the title of the map. And maybe the tavern keep trying to explain what the hell's going on, but for the most part, you really just have to hope you're catching the little clues left and right, otherwise you're just going to be left in the dark. Lastly, there is the toughest map, which is Engines of War. If I were to rate the difficulty of each of the maps, I would say Horn of Magnus is like the second most difficult, and Man the Ramparts is by far the easiest. And Engines of War is just absurdo difficult. It's actually the most difficult map in the game so far of the 3 of 12 maps that exist. In the beta, we only got a chance to play the 3 that I just mentioned: Horn of Magnus, Man the Ramparts, not Man of Ramparts, and Engines of War. Engines of War takes place outside of the city, so you'll be in a misty, swamp-like jungle-type area. And you'll be going through trying to blow up various items that the Skaven have been building in their own private little nest. And you'll meet lots of really interesting contraptions as you go along there. and hopefully you guys will be able to check those out when you play the game, because they are pretty cool. However, it didn't make any sense why I was really there, other than I just destroyed a few things and then left on a boat. So, I mean, that was kind of weird. Hopefully the developers will be able to explain the story a little bit better when they release the rest of the maps out there. But for the most part, I found Horn of Magnus to be by far the best map so far. And that was the first one I got to play, and the first one that most people, I think, will be able to play when they pick up the game for themselves. Let's see, what else? We have the adventure completion. So whenever you complete a game, that's when you get loot. That's when the dice get rolled, that's when everything happens. But also there's a separate leveling system. So you start at level 0, and you work your way up. You don't have to level each individual hero. Your level actually carries over for every hero. So if you get level 5, say on your elf, you're level 5 for every other hero, like the Bright Wizard and whatnot. So you don't have to worry about that crap. But at the end of each level, you get experience points based off how many heroes survived. And I don't think bots count. I think it only counts if you have actual human players playing with you. You get extra points for the difficulty you beat it on, and I think you get some extra points for when you get tomes. So those tomes are the things that take up those medical slots. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The levels seem to just unlock extra trinket slots, and of the 20 hours I played, I never got extra trinkets, but Co-Carnage, he explained what trinkets are, and he said that the trinkets are these little bonus items that give you extra stats, so they improve your stats and whatnot. And since we're on the topic now of stats, your weapons do have different stats. So as you increase the rarity of your items, as you increase the different abilities and upgrade them accordingly, depending on what you do with the weapon, you will do more damage to either a variety of enemies or just one specific enemy. There's weapons that have poison on them and weapons that have armor piercing. There's weapons that can hit more targets in a wide arc. There's weapons that are more focused towards single target damage. Each type of weapon has its own moveset. Short swords have a different moveset from daggers. Twin daggers have a different moveset from daggers. Warhammers have a different moveset from great swords, and axes have different movesets from great axes and stuff like that. You have the sword and shield has a different moveset from the axe and shield, and I think you get the picture there. Everything has a different moveset, and every player, I think, will be able to find something that works to their liking once they start getting a bunch of loot. And trust me, once you start beating the game a lot on easy, you're going to get a lot of different types of weapons and start to understand what you'd like and what you dislike about the game. And also, for example, I got a weapon for my wizard, and she has a sword where if I do a heavy attack, I'll ignite enemies on fire, which is pretty well suited for the Bright Wizard, because that's pretty darn cool. So I believe that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover about Warhammer End Times Vermintide. If you have any questions about the game that I did not cover in this video, I did my best. I wrote everything down to make sure I could cover everything. Please ask me in the chat, or in the comments below. Excuse me, I have my Twitch commentary going on with that. And speaking of Twitch, I do live stream every single day at 8 AM Eastern. I'll be playing a lot of Vermintide when it releases on October 23rd. There's another beta coming up as well, so now's a good time to go follow me on there, because I'll be doing a bunch more live streams on Warhammer End Time Vermintide. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully I was able to show you guys and teach you something about the game, or maybe even some of the lore about the Skaven. If anyone has any information about the Skaven that they would like to share with everyone, please feel free to do so in the comments below. I am Akabane101. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.